let's now talk about managing and preserving our evidence. Now, everything kind of boils down to the integrity of those systems, of the files, of the hard drives, or the images of those hard drives. And it kind of falls into two kind of areas that we've been sort of working through, right? We've got our chain of custody, which we have to be really meticulous around. So I'm going to say chain of custody because again, and I really want to drive the emphasis of our chain of custody because this is super, super important across the entire process. Again, managing that chain of custody, anytime we make changes or anything that we're going to do to that evidence, being the mobile phone, being the actual laptop, being the physical, the physical appliance or that digital device that we're going to investigate, anytime it moves hands, moves locations, anytime we do analysis to it or preserve it somehow or do something, we're going to run a hash to do an image check, then we're going to have to stipulate that we did some hashing or we opened up the safe at 7 a.m., run some hashing commands by 7:05 a.m., put it back in the safe. So it's an audit activity log that's going to be used as documentation and ensuring that that evidence was not tampered with in a malicious nature while it was in our hands. So again, we want to make sure that it's not tampered with and obviously that data remains trusted and verified at all times. So the integrity behind the actual data or the imaging of that data. So chain of custody, super, 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 super important. Then we've got our hashing. So we've already discussed what hashing is in a previous video. If you're unsure, go back to one of the videos where I've discussed hashing. I'll cover it again in this video. But hashing is basically as we take a one-way function. So we take a file of such, we run it through a blender. That could be your mathematical algorithm in that state. So we can run it through MD5 or SHA, different flavors of SHA. And then that spits out our digest. So it can spit out our value of string here, and it usually just represents the original state of that data. So we take the original state of that data, we run it through the algorithm, and then it gives us our value of the hash, our string hash, and then we can then represent the original state of that data. So should we then go and collect, or if we take the original data essentially and use the same hash or the same tool type, basically, and run it through that same hash algorithm again, well, the output should be the same. It should not be altered. It should not be changed. If they're equal at the time of the hash verification, then that's great. That's what's going to happen throughout the entire process as well. So should there be a court appearance that we have to go through, there's going to be different hashes and validity purposes that we're going to have to go through to ensure that there's been integrity in the files, that there's been matching through the hashes, and there's been no altered state across the devices and ensuring they haven't been tampered with in a malicious way. So keep that in mind when we're talking about hashing. There's obviously then tool sets as we continue this discussion with hashing, because it's one of the most important parts across this preservation piece to ensure that there's the integrity behind the original evidence. Different tool sets, again, we've got FTK imager that's available to us that can then take the images and give us obviously the hashed versions and obviously the hash representations. So we can take that original image and then give us the hash at the time of imaging, which is ideal, right? We want that to happen. Again, DD doesn't create a hash of the image, which can be sometimes annoying. So there's other functions that we can use. There's also something called SSD that we can use. It's a functionality that we can use to pull out the hash of the file, and then we can use things like the SHA. We can use our SHA sum value to then give us the actual SHA sum of that file if we're using Windows and Linux and stuff like that. So we can use different command line tools to then go away and give us other utilities that can pull out and give us that information. SSDeep is very common. You can look at SSDeep and understand how that kind of works. Finally, as we continue on, we want to make sure that we document, let's say documentation, because this is vital throughout that process, and it's documentation across that process. So this is everything to do with our evidence and the integrity of our evidence. And it's ensuring that the evidence that's collected during the imaging process has been defined, it's detailed, and the evidence that's collected during the court appearance as well. So we have to document those hashes through any time we make changes, just to keep the validity and making sure that, again, everything kind of comes down to the chain of custody and preserving that data, and it doesn't remain altered or doesn't get altered in that state of transfer. And obviously we do that with hashing. I hope you've enjoyed this video. This was quite an overview of the preservation of the evidence. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and see you all in the next video.